All right, guys, I am back. Let me move this off. We have on the line with us Ned Colletti. Ned, the Giants made a big move today. They decided to move on from Gabe Kapler. Without me leading you in any direction, give me your assessment of the happenings and the announcement.
Well, I'm sure it's not an easy day for the Giants or for Farhan. Obviously, it's there's somebody he's known for a while and somebody I'm sure he respects deeply. So never an easy day. The business is really decided in the standings and how well your team plays and how well they execute and how well they follow what you set forth. And that's it. Generally, sometimes there's more to it. There's typically always more to it than any of us really know. We can speculate, but speculation is just that. So not sure, obviously, what led to this conversation. I know whenever I had to make that type of move, it was because the players had stopped playing for the manager, started to show in their thought process, their lack of execution, things along those lines. Now, that's my decision making. That I'm not saying that's Farhan's or that's what occurred, but uh, always a tough day. There's no doubt, but you have to figure out how to get better, how to get your organization better, and whether or not Gabe wanted to stay or whatever. I'm not sure what his contract situation was, but there's a lot of factors that go into it. But for me, it always came down to, is the manager getting the most out of the players? Do they play hard? Do they pay attention to detail? When that starts to slip, if you're unprepared, somebody's got to pay that price, and it's tough to get 26 people to pay that price.
Do you think that the Giants? Would you say that the Giants underachieved based on their talent, overachieved based on their talent? How would you? It wasn't a very talented roster. It wasn't a. It wasn't like Farhan deserves no blame here. It's not, the Giants don't have a really talented roster. There was a lot of platoons. How do you assess blame between the roster that Gabe was given and the job that he did to get the most out of it?
Well, I'm not sure that the team is capable of winning 90 games the way constituted, or 85 games. They're certainly not the Dodgers. They're not close to the Dodgers right now, and that's the team you got to beat inside the division. So you got to take that into consideration. Could they have won 3 or 4 more games? Yeah, probably. Could they have lost 3 or 4 more games? Yeah, probably. They're probably in and around the talent of the club. And I don't think they underachieved. I don't think they overachieved. I think they probably played to the way that they're constituted within means. But I think that's the deal. When you're trying to be 500, that's you should be figuring out how to get to 500 by the time they get to June 1st.
To me, there was the awkwardness of this was only there. It only made it more awkward when Brian went back to the Yankees and Boch came back and managed the Rangers this year. I think directly or indirectly that dialed up some heat on this regime and made the fans view this regime in a different light. Do you think that's fair?
That's possible. I mean, you're talking about 2 Hall of Fame, 1 executive and 1 manager. There's not a lot of managers in the Hall of Fame. There's not a lot of executives in the Hall of Fame. And I may be premature in speculating that, but their records indicate that's where they're going to end up. And I guess whenever you move people out, and I hadn't really thought about your question before, as you move people out that have had great success, that are not ready to shut it down, maybe needed a break, maybe needed to take a year or two and refresh a little bit. You're first off, you're kind of held to that accountability. Who came before you? And then when whatever decisions are made and those people leave for other organizations, that kind of puts the heat on you a little bit. But again, when they win 107 games or whatever that figure was a couple of years ago, nobody thought about saves then or boats then. But as you struggle to be in and around 500, and people are leaving your organization, and saves will have an impact on the Yankees. Boats has already had an impact on Texas. People ask the question, why'd they leave?
Exactly. I think, and then it also makes you wonder: were they mistreated on the way out, considering what they had accomplished? A guy in the chat, FPS, is saying, Larry, ask Ned about the Giants' goals, as they stated, being only to play meaningful games in the month of September. Isn't that a weak goal? What do you think? I mean, it's the San Francisco Giants, Ned, and you and Brian ran this thing for over a long period of time. What was the goal? What was the stated goal from the top? Was it was it who set the goal? Was it Brian? Was it you? Was it the owners? And what should the goal be for a franchise like the San Francisco Giants that has unbelievable wealth? We're talking about the sixth highest revenue team in the sport.
Well, starting in 1997, when Brian became the GM and I became the assistant GM, the goal was to play as deep as you could play, to play in October. That was the first goal. And then to play as deep into October as you possibly could. It's the big leagues. It's not the try-hard league. It's not, it's you're expected to produce to the highest magnitude, not try to get halfway there or three-quarters of the way there. If it was a very, very young team with a lot of high-end prospects that were getting their feet wet and struggling along the way, but you knew that they were going to, through the struggle, get better, which is a lot of times what prospects, really top high-end prospects, end up doing. Then okay, then you kind of live with, okay, let's see let's see how long it goes before we get eliminated. But I can't tell you that Sabes and I ever sat there for a long time we were together. Even when I left, my goal was the same. His goal was the same. If you look at the Dodgers and the Giants from '97 on, how many of those either franchise made the playoffs or made the LCS? I mean, it was dominant, and that was the mindset. The mindset didn't change. It's why we went to work, why we did what we did. I think if we after 97, 98, if the goal was to be good and to be entertaining, but hey, if you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. I think we both would have left.
Interesting. Very interesting. Nick J in the chat says, Larry, could you ask Ned, knowing the current state of the Giants, if they reached out, would he entertain a role with the team hypothetically? Where are you in your career?
I don't want to go there. I have great respect for the organization. Was just there, a month ago for Mike Murphy's Hall of Fame induction. I loved it. I love the people there and the coaching staffs that we worked with and the players. It's great to see everybody. It's my home is Chicago. Okay, and I don't live in Chicago. I lived in Chicago for almost 30 years. But after that, I mean, that franchise holds a very esteemed place for me, and hopefully always will. But I don't want to get into any stuff. That's not something I care to discuss, or that's out of my conversation today, Larry.
I hear you. So, but when you say you don't want to go there, you don't mean you wouldn't consider it. You just mean you don't want to talk about it right now.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. Fair enough. That's fair. Ned, what is in a situation like this? You have hired managers. So, how does the beginning of that process look? And did you inherit Grady Little and hire Joe Torre?
No, I hired Grady, and then I switched from Grady to Joe after our second year together.
How did those two searches go? I mean, and how does that go? How does that begin?
Well, it happens two different ways. If it happens in the middle of the season, before you make move A, you got to have move B. You got to move B. Have that move right there too. You can't do one without the other. You get to the off season, you should have some feel for where you're going, or at least what type of person you're looking for, and have enough scouting done on them, so to speak, that you have a short list. The day that our season ended, my second year in LA, which was the '07 season, and I had a sense that Grady didn't really want to come back. I think the year may have been a lot for all of us. The next morning, I was on a flight to Florida to meet with Joe Girardi. And about a week later, Joe Torre left the Yankees, and I knew Joe Girardi was going to be their main guy. So I called Joe Girardi, who I'd known since he was drafted in the Cub organization when I worked there. And I said, obviously we're talking to you, and we're kind of down the road with you. We'd love to hire you. But with this change in the Yankees, there's a chance that you're going to be the first choice. And he says, well, I've been doing games where I coached, I played, and Joe and I were really tight, and I learned a lot from him. So if there was two choices, I'd probably go to New York. And I said, I appreciate the honesty. And the next day I was talking to Torrey, and a couple of days later I went to see him. I talked to him on a Thursday. I went to see him on a Saturday. He happened to be in Las Vegas at a conference, and went and spent the entire day with him before he went off to the dinner for his event. And he flew to LA the next day, met ownership, and a couple of days later he was a Dodger. But I had people in mind. When I knew that I was going to make a change, I had two people in mind immediately, Girardi. And then when Girardi had the opportunity to go to the Yankees, I pivoted to Joe Torre in a heartbeat. I knew what I needed. I needed leadership. I need somebody who could manage young players and veteran players, because the team that the 08 team was a combination of both. And we struggled in 07 because the younger players, the Matt Kemps, the Russell Martins, James Loney's, all these guys, there was a bridge between them and the older guys. And we needed to be able to traverse that bridge. I needed somebody who had leadership, who people would respect, who would hold people accountable, and at the same time get the younger players to play up to their potential. It's still a teaching game. Just because you show up at the big leagues doesn't mean you're completely educated in the game. Players, the best players I know, learn after 25 years. They're still learning something. Greg Maddux learned till his last pitch. Guys like that, Tony Gwynn, same thing. So, it was a teaching gig. It was also let's get this thing to be as good as it can be, whether it's a 23-year-old, a 33-year-old, or somebody in between. So I had a very narrow list, and I also had a iconic brand that I knew there'd be people interested in. So that's where I started, and within a couple of days, within maybe 7 to 10 days, we were where we needed to be.
Was major league managerial experience a prerequisite in your mind?
It was for that team. It was, it's the Los Angeles Dodgers, not that the Giants or anything less.
Sure.
You're talking about, again, I always felt it was tough to experiment in the big leagues. Whether it's a player, whether it's a coach, whether it's a manager, you might have a couple players that are young and are going to have to figure it out on the fly with great leadership around them. And you may have a young coach or two that you need the same. But this isn't a little town, a little team out in the prairie someplace. This is one of the iconic franchises. So, you got to have somebody who's up to that standard and understands it, understands what it means. The definition of a Giant is different than the definition of any other organization anywhere. It's a special breed. Always has been a special breed since I got into the game. When I think back to the Giants and Robbie Thompson and Matt Williams, guys like that. I mean, look how they played. Look how they grinded it out in a nasty ballpark with bad weather. But you always knew going in there, these guys were going to play. These guys were going to give us, and they may be a second division team at that moment in time, but you always knew that they had some grit to them. And I think that there's a description someplace of a San Francisco Giant. What does that player look like? And you've got to have somebody that can make that a reality.
What is the fact that they made this move before the end of the season? I don't know. I'm not saying that you have any insight specifically, but generally, does that tell you anything as a man of your experience of what the thinking may have been? Why not wait until Monday morning? Or what's your takeaway when you see that?
This is the things we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know what meetings people have had or things like that. And, maybe Farhan talked and then Gabe talked a week ago and said, we're going to make a change when the season's over. Why would you wait? Why would you put Gabe through 3 more days of what's going to happen? What's going to happen? You don't want to do that. So, if you're going to do something, especially when it's the end of the season and you don't have to have plan B sitting there immediately, you do what's classy and what's best, especially when you're talking about changing a career and changing a job. Everybody's human and everybody's got that attribute to them. And you can't forget that, whether they're players, whether they're coaches, whether they're executives, whoever it is. Everybody's got a passion for the sport. It's an honor to be associated with the sport. And so you have to understand that this is going to be a change for Gabe and a change for his, what he does. And nobody likes to have that type of conversation. You have to have it, obviously, if you're in leadership. But, You have to do what's best. You have to do what's best for the organization, but you also have to keep in mind that you're not talking about robots. You're talking about, a good person, a human being in Gabe.
What do the Giants need, Ned, as far as to be? I mean, I'm sure at this point you have seen the Tom Verducci piece where he describes their regime as tedious but efficient, which is tedious is a terrible word to use in a sport that's really about entertainment. Do you think there's damage done to the brand of San Francisco Giants within the sport when an article like that gets written by a man like Verducci, who's not a hit? He doesn't do hit pieces. It's he carries quite a bit of credibility.
I think if there is, it's temporary.
Okay.
I think, if you look at the 2024 Giants and they contend with the Dodgers and they're in the playoff hunt, or they got a 5 or 6 game lead with 3 to play, yeah, then people go, oh yeah, you remember the article? I don't even know if anybody even reckoned with it. But I think it depends where it goes. I think it's either going to be the beginning of a conversation that has a lot of life to it, or it's going to be forgotten within a season because things are different and they're not as described. And just because he describes, and I love Tom Verducci, I've known him for decades.
Sure,
great writer, great. I mean, like you say, not a guy that's going after people, hardly ever, if
right.
ever. And that's his opinion as of today. Can that change? That can change in a minute. But he laid it out there. I'm sure he didn't lay it out there haphazardly either.
Couple last moments with Ned Colletti, who's kind enough to give us some of his time. The story of the day: the Giants have parted ways with manager Gabe Kapler with a few games left in his 4th season. He had a 107 win year, which is the franchise record in wins, and then no years beyond that above 500. Ned, do you think the Giants have made this move knowing who their next manager is, or can you make a move like this and feel good about it without maybe even knowing who the next guy is going to be?
Well, I think you either know who it is or you got a short list.
Okay.
I mean, you're going to run through. You're probably going to run through also, a lot of people, which also gives you the experience to listen and learn from other people. I know some people that have interviewed 9 or 10 different managers, candidates, just to learn, just to get a better feel for it. But I would guess that they have a pretty good idea of who's available, going to be available, or who they think meets what they're trying to accomplish. I think you've at least got the outline of it. You may not have the specific of the person there, but you've got a feel for it. But again, I'm doing this, from my cell phone, not from an office.
No, I hear you, and we do appreciate you jumping in. I'm very fond of Ron Wotus, and I know you know Ronnie well.
Yeah.
And you guys, there's a lot of bread's been broken there through the years. What can you tell us about Ron? And I mean, he was a very successful minor league manager. I felt like Brian could have gone to him instead of Bochy when he went to Bochy, but he opted for Bruce. Obviously, 3 titles later, nobody would question that. But what do you think of Ron's resume for a position like this at this point in time?
Well, just from the outside, and you're talking about one of my dear friends. I have so much respect for him, and I think he would be an outstanding manager in the right situation. It's got to be a right situation for the other, for the manager as well, not just, hey, I'll take a job, any job. I don't know where that comes out, but he's very well schooled. He went through, he learned. He's always learning. He was a type of player that had to pay attention to detail to even play in the big leagues. Okay, so he's not somebody that takes anything for granted. He is attention to detail guy that worked for Dusty, worked for Felipe, worked for Boch, worked for Cap. So he's watched some of the best in the business do this. He's was an integral part of championship type seasons and really ultra competitive teams that never made it to the Fall Classic. So he's got all that experience, and if you couple that with his approach, where again, like I'm going to go back to the thing I just opened this comment with, he's attention to detail. He knows what he needs to do to have make people successful, and go from there. That's how he played. Look at his major league career. You're not talking about 2,000 games, 2,000 hits. Talking about an extra player that played here and there. Those guys had to be ready. And then that he coaches as he did in the minor leagues, works his way up to a big league staff and stays there for however long it's been, 25 years perhaps. And to coach under the managers that he's managed under, he started out with the energy and the hunger to learn as much as he could to be as good as he could. And then he sat with people who could teach him even more than that. So, I don't know that there's a better choice. I don't know. But I don't know who else is a choice.
Sure. Last question, and we appreciate you jumping in. You are uniquely positioned to answer this question. And we've been friends for years. And one thing I love about talking to you on the air, whether it be on KMBR, 95.7 The Game, or on this YouTube channel, is you're candid, you're smart, and you've always been very fair-minded. But you also are one of the only guys in the last 30 years that could really speak to the Giants culture and the Dodgers culture. And right now, the Dodgers, if this were a fight, they would stop it. And the Dodgers have owning this division. The Giants are on the outside looking in. Give us your perspective on what the Dodgers do that the Giants don't do, what the Giants need to do first and foremost to start running on the Dodgers level. I mean, you've seen it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You've seen the majors, the minors, the development staffs, the scouting departments. You know this like very few people in the world, to be honest. As candid as you can be without I'm not looking for any real soundbite. I'm just looking for your honest assessment. Are the Giants? Is there a way they can get on the Dodgers level? Is it an impossibility? Give me your perspective.
It's not an impossibility, and I'd rather just address what the Dodgers do because I
Sure.
don't know what I don't live in the other place. The Dodgers have, whether it was my era or Andrew's era, you look at the number of players who were drafted or internationally signed that made an impact. I'll go back to my era. Corey Seager, Clayton Kershaw, Kenley Jansen, Jock Peterson, Cody Bellinger, on and on and on, right? So they were supported and supplanted with free agency, not built around free agency, built around a farm system who knew how to develop players, knew how to draft, sign, and develop players. Okay, that's A. And I'm not saying it. I'm not talking about somebody who doesn't. I'm just talking about what they do.
Right.
And they go out and they trade for Mookie because they have the prospect capital to get Boston interested, at least one-sided deal, in my opinion. And they have the finances to take on what's coming. Okay, same thing with Freddie. Same exact thing almost. And you look at their team; it's their number one and number two hitter. Both, they finish. Those two players could finish in the top three in the MVP voting. Okay, you look what Corey's doing in Texas. I mean, on and on and on. Kenley, the whole group. So that's A. The second thing is when you watch them play, count how many times, whether it's offensive, at the plate or on the mound, how many pitches in a game do they take off? You may watch weeks of games and never see them take a pitch off. I can't say that about hardly any other team in the game. Guys get tired. Guys take pitches off. Pitchers make foolish pitches. Don't really think about it. No, they've developed a culture there, and whether it was Clayton or Justin Turner or whoever kind of really put it in place and all galvanized around it, they don't ever take a pitch off, in my opinion. I shouldn't say ever, but hardly ever do they take a pitch off. And that's how when you have talent and you've developed the right people and they understand what it means to be in the organization and you support it with some big free agents or big trades for potential free agents, all-star caliber players, and nobody takes a pitch off. And your hardest working player on that team, the top two guys, and they all work hard, are Mookie and Freddie. Your two best players are your hardest workers. They set the stage. They bring everybody with them, and everybody wants to be a part of it, and so off they go.
Ned, thank you very much for jumping in here. I realize you're in the middle of your day, and I called you last second.
I'm actually going to a wedding in about 15 minutes. So
nice.
Anyway.
Well, wish the bride and groom luck, and I love you, brother. Thank you very much for jumping in, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, Larry.
There you go, Ned Colletti.